Throughout life, we meet others who have insights and experiences quite unlike our own. The great ideas of classical works resonate differently with them. Often these treasures of mind and heart go unshared, reserved from others in the course of daily life. But what if we took the time to have those conversations, to sit down and recall those thoughts, those impressions upon us that moved us along our path? Why then, we would no longer be alone, and at least for one shimmering moment, someone else could see the world through our eyes. I give you the Confederal Reserve. Welcome to the Confederal Reserve, presented by BetterPears. I am your host, Dr. Jason Fugikawa. The Confederal Reserve is a show that connects old friends, that is, Confederates, to discuss the ideas and classical works that have shaped their lives and worldviews. Before we get going, I invite you to like this episode, subscribe to the BetterPears channel if you have not already, and click the bell icon to receive notifications that you remain the first to know of future interviews and podcast episodes. If you would like to support the work of BetterPears with your Federal Reserve notes and receive fractional gold in the mail each month, please follow the link in the description to our crowdfunding program, BetterPears Leaves. As a special bonus for the rest of 2024, every qualifying contribution earns an entry in our monthly Market Mug giveaway. Official rules are available at betterpears.com/giveaway. Now then, the structure of our show is our gimmick we want you to mimic. Our guest for the episode will offer a classical work of particular import to his or her life. What ensues is a conversation that uncovers insights and offers new perspectives on old works. It is a conversation between friends, which is the building block of the cultural renaissance that BetterPears seeks to foster. Our guest today is Thomas Pietropaoli. Thomas studied philosophy and theology at St. Anselm College and philosophy at the graduate level at the Catholic University of America. A former Catholic schoolteacher, he now serves as an evangelist at St. Mary and Joseph Catholic Church in Salem, New Hampshire. It is my great pleasure to welcome our guest today on the Confederal Reserve, Thomas Pietropaoli. Thomas, welcome.
Thank you, Jason.
Glad to have you on the show. And again, we kick off here with our gimmick we want you to mimic. The initial question here is, what is your vintage work and why is it so important?
So the vintage work I chose to go with is The Republic by Plato. And there are a lot of ways to approach its importance. For one thing, it's a way of encountering the thought of Plato, who's one of the most gifted thinkers in the history of philosophy, probably in the history of the whole human race. I think it was Alfred North Whitehead who said that the safest general characterization of Western philosophy is that it has consisted of a series of footnotes to Plato. That might be something of an overstatement, but it's not too hyperbolic. So personally, though, I first encountered the thought of Plato, the mind of Plato, when I was an undergraduate at St. Anselm. And it wasn't the Republic. It was some of the shorter dialogues, the Meno, the Phaedo, the Apology, etc. And I was very moved by the way he used rational argumentation to try to get at the truth of things. And especially, one of the things this is looking back, but one of the things I think he had an incredible ability to see and to weave together in his thinking was the continuity between living a good life as an individual, which is a crisis that we all find ourselves in, because it's possible to not live a good life. And I remember as even a young person being troubled by that possibility, and that's one of the things that drew me to philosophy, was the direct encounter with the question of, like, what is happiness? What does it mean to live a good life? But Plato knew that living a good life as an individual is connected to our social dimension as human beings, and it's also connected even to what we might call the divine dimension. I think Plato sees that as a continuum, and all those different parts have to harmonize for real human flourishing, enduring human flourishing to happen. And he probably goes at that nowhere more explicitly than in the Republic. The Republic. I mean, there are other dialogues that are wonderful and easier to look at in one sense because you're dealing with less text, but to really delve into the mind of Plato and into this vision, a very holistic vision of reality that weaves these different things together and that really has an ethics connected to an epistemology, connected to a metaphysics, connected to a political theory. I mean, to have that, to spin out a vision that has all those things connected coherently, it's very impressive and really had a deep impact on me. And continues to. I continue to read Plato in my spare time, even though I usually don't directly teach classes that in which Plato will figure, but I still go back to Plato repeatedly. So.
Sure. Okay. Well, there's a number of things I'd like to sort of unpack and kind of clarify in what you just sort of suggested. So, you mentioned the Republic and a number of his other works as dialogues. So for someone who hasn't formally studied philosophy, what's the deal with this dialogue business? In the sense of, like, if you expect to learn something philosophy, you would expect, like, just the author to write something, and then for you to either, like, believe it or not, right? And so, is there something important about referring to these things as dialogues? If they are indeed dialogues, then, like, why do you think he does that? Why do you think he writes in dialogue as opposed to just a treatise or an exposition?
Oh, that's a good question. I begin by saying there's probably multiple reasons. I'll try to offer a few. One is I think that Plato and probably Aristotle to some extent too, and this is more common in ancient and medieval thinkers, human rationality is not something that is essentially exercised in isolation. Jürgen Habermas, I think it was, who said that conversation is like the primary context for human rationality. That it is in the give and take of minds meeting and trying to come to the truth that you have the most opportunity, I think, for growth and awareness, for clearing away of deceptive pieces of debris that obscure our vision of what's real. So I think that Plato had a very strong sense of that. And it wasn't, this might sound odd because the very word academy, of course, comes from the Grove of Academe, where Plato founded a school. But it's not simply an academic exercise. It's not something. It's something that happens in the give and take of human life and even human political life. And it also is something that capitalizes on the potentialities in friendship. Right? You'll see that in the Republic, that some of the interlocutors are clearly friends, and they're able. It's interesting because the friends are able to go deeper. There are some characters who are not friendly persons and are caustic, and they contribute, but the real deep things come about when these friends come together and really go after the truth together, partially by questioning each other, by unearthing assumptions that people might not see about their own positions.
Very good. Yeah. No. As you were saying, kind of the need for conversation as sort of this almost sort of tool for grasping the truth or realizing conclusions. The introvert in me is like, well, no, we introverts, we don't need that, right? So the extroverts who like talk through things with one another, that you kind of clearly see, and I think in Plato's dialogues you get that. You get some characters, characters are kind of moving things along, and then every once in a while you'll get kind of like the introvert characters who are kind of like sort of taking up kind of space in the back of the scene. who will then kind of interject something new, and maybe they talk for a good long while, and maybe they talk for just a little bit. But I think even for the introverts among us, I still claim to be one, that having kind of the dialogue happen in front of you, right, being parts of conversations, even if you're more of the wallflower type, do allow for the ideas to sort of be entertained in your own mind that you don't have necessarily when you're kind of alone in solitude and not kind of discursively thinking yourself or having it played out in front of you. Moving on, though, I think you talked in your kind of introductory explanation of its import of the Republic, this sort of connection between sort of the individual, and I missed maybe if there was some connection to, say, the communal or the common good, but then you made that step to something like a divine community or connection, and I think one of the paradigms that I kind of recall from the Republic is this sort of the city as the soul writ large, right? The inner workings of the human soul and its various kind of desires and fears get played out in this city and speech that Plato Socrates kind of works out with the other interlocutors of the dialogue. So I just wanted to know what kind of, could you add some meat to that structure in terms of what do you see is kind of the main argument or thrust of Plato, and whether or not you buy it, I guess, is the bigger question.
The main argument and thrust of the Republic specifically, of Plato in the entirety of his corpus and thinking, of a specific part of the Republic. Sorry, just trying to hone in.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to pick a Plato Aristotelian fight here, because you've argued that I think you've argued that Plato, through Plato Socrates in the Republic, you got to kind of give all the kind of
right
mitigating factors there, right? Is presenting an organization not only of the individual but also of society, and the way that society comes into being, and perhaps by extension, maybe the analogy kind of wanes that. There's a lot of sort of violence done to the city and speech in its creation, right? In the various waves, and things get introduced, and people get kind of kicked out of the city for a time, maybe permanently, and so Plato, I think, is really kind of like dealing with whole cloth and projecting an idea of a restructured society. I think the commentators are kind of, it's a disputed question as to whether that's actually what Plato is trying to suggest, or whether that's sort of just a necessary fiction of the Republic to allow for what really needs to kind of be said about the human soul, right? Is the Plato's Republic really about a rightly ordered human soul, in which things like what we would consider injustices and the various ways and exterminations in the Republic, when those things happen, are those like, is he giving like a political recipe, I guess, or is he simply more focused on the individual, and that the illustrations of the city in speech simply there to elaborate on his primary goal, the soul?
Yeah, that's a very comment. It's a question that draws a lot of commentary, as you're aware and alluding to. I'm not going to pretend that I can give a good, clear answer. I don't have the level of scholarship, and even if I did, I mean, it seems to me there's not necessarily clear consensus even among people who wear the hat of expertise in this area. I will say, I'll go back to the point I made in the introduction and maybe try to clarify it a little bit, which might help our conversation. I do think whether or not Plato's, I will say this, I'm not, it doesn't seem to me that his primary interest is in giving a recipe for an ideal political state. He might have that as a secondary interest, and there were episodes in his life which indicate that he did have hopes of being able to sort of incarnate these concepts, especially in, I think, Syracuse. It was he, befriended a leader there. That didn't go particularly well, and I think after that he prescinded from overt political involvement. But there were points in his life where he seemed to hold this hope in his heart, and I'm not sure whether we can know enough about that historical episode to say, oh, he was clearly trying to impose the Republic on Syracuse. But so it might have been, just to go back, it might have been a secondary issue. It might have been something that it is serious for him. And again, because to return to that point, like the life of the individual, the socio-political dimension, and the divine dimension, if you will, for him are all intimately interconnected. They're not, you can't really, and that's part of his argument will follow a form that indicates that you can't simply separate them and deal with them in isolation. I mean, even, fairly early on in the Republic, he offers a pretty severe critique of some of the classical poets. Homer comes in for some heavy-handed treatment. But part of his point is that, when people tell stories about the gods that give bad impressions of the divine, you have a serious issue because humans are going to model their life on that, and what we believe about God is not incidental to how we organize our lives together and how we live our lives as individuals. But I do think that the political question, to some extent, is secondary to the interest in spelling out what a virtuous, just soul looks like, and why that is better, right, than living a horrifically unjust life where everyone thinks you're just, so you get all the benefits of a good reputation, but you get to indulge in all the vices that you want. And I think that is his primary target, and I really think that's the political analogy is in the service of making that point.
I think that is a strong positive statement. I've now got you on the record with, right? That Socrates is interested in the individual. Where there are some, I don't know how many, but would see him as this great social planner, right? Because that's kind of what it looks like he's doing, and yet if you kind of take a step back and look at the dialogues and look at kind of the time and attention used in confronting just a singular interlocutor, a singular person he kind of encounters, right? That he isn't talking grand revolution of brainwashing folks with the noble lie, and you would only do that to the Guardians. But but he is kind of more concerned with what is needed to form his students, those closest to him, those kind of encountering others along with him in his various dialogues, including this one. Which I guess brings me, if we want to kind of think about Plato and Socrates' Plato as, Plato Socrates as kind of focused on the individual. I think one of the things that comes to mind when people think of Plato's Republic is the allegory of the cave, and how it now seems just sort of like a season of Black Mirror or something, right? That, that you'd have sort of this dystopian situation where it seems everybody is kind of caught up looking at screens. Everyone watching this is looking at a screen right now, right? You're not actually seeing us in your living room or on your subway ride or whatever, right? Like there's a phantasm that is sort of pervading in human life through technology, and yet, right, is the allegory of the cave about a societal concern about everybody being kind of lost in images and not the reality of things and not seeing the true light of the day, or do you see that allegory as related to kind of the education, right, the being led out of the darkness of the cave of each individual? Like how does it sit with you, and how does this first hit you, I guess?
Right. Uh, it hits me sort of in two ways, and this is part of the richness of it, I think. One is, and it's important to take the text as it is, I think, first and foremost, the literal sense, if you will. And it does seem like Plato is quite interested in the way the analogy illustrates a process of education. Education not in the sense education in the sense of being freed from illusion and error and brought to the vision of the good or God. I mean, so it's not it's not politically ideological in the least what he means by education, but he is interested in that, and I mean you could have a discussion too about whether or not that vision is somewhat dualistic, because it does seem to be like if you think about do you want me to spell out the analogy, or should we assume our listeners are
It might be helpful
conversant in it?
to spin me a tale of
Uh,
the allegory of the cave.
okay, so I'll try to do it fairly briefly. Yeah, so he asks at the beginning of book 7. He asks, I think he's talking to Glaucon at the moment. Socrates is talking to Glaucon, but Glaucon is actually a brother of Plato, or a half brother of Plato. So, yeah, he asks him to imagine this scene where you have these people who are in a cave, which is, as caves are, quite dark, and they're fettered. They can't really move, and even their heads are somehow shackled and controlled, and they're just sitting there, chained in the darkness, looking at a wall. And behind them, and unbeknownst to them, is there's a fire behind and above, and of course the fire throws light on the wall. And in between the captives and the flames, there's like a walkway, and people are walking along that walkway, and they're kind of hidden behind a wall, and they're carrying like shapes of things, objects that they kind of hold up that catch the light and are reflected onto the wall. And these people also make noise. So the people who are who are captivated, if you will, they think those shadows are all there is, and they're really enthralled by them, and they organize them mentally, and they have discussions about them, and they focus on them and fixate on them. So anyway, but at some point somebody gets liberated, and that's actually an interesting thing in itself, because I think there's a very strong indication, and this was first made clear to me actually by Eric Vogelin. It's not my own insight, but that it seems like you can't liberate yourself. There almost has to be like some salvation that comes to you. And Plato even uses the phrase of being dragged. You're liberated, and then you're dragged out of your position of captivity by the fire, and then there's a tunnel that leads to the surface, to the world of the real things, of which everything you've been looking at is just like basically a shadow of an imitation. And up there, you have a struggle, and it's hard to see, and it hurts. But there you can see the sun, the real light, the good. And just very briefly to bring it to a conclusion, at at some point, Plato talks about how the person should go back down into the cave or is drawn back down into the cave to try to explain to the people still there that they're really captivated and spending their lives and uh, looking at things and excited about things that aren't real. So this individual goes and does that, but there's an indication it doesn't go well for him. Like Plato seems to think the people might just get mad and he's going to look foolish and they might actually kill him. So anyway, that's a quick rundown of it.
I don't think the death of Socrates is a spoiler at this point, so
No.
it does indeed not go well for Socrates in this life, at least, when he returns to the city to try to liberate the captives. Very good. Yeah. No. So we could see in that allegory, right? One's sort of individual growth and liberation through an education in the true and the good and the beautiful, right? And oftentimes, right, as the educator, it kind of does seem like the student is kicking and screaming because obviously you're trying to offer them something that they don't already have, and therefore it seems foreign. It seems like they're allergic to them, right? That is their response. I wonder though. And this is where allegories, if you force them too hard, do they actually hold, right? Is if the whole process is sort of this internal movement of the individual towards a greater understanding of what is true and good, or the societal element, you still have this sort of situation of the people who are carrying the images in front of the fire, and it doesn't seem that they are fettered. And I kind of feel better if they're not, because then maybe they have access to the light of day, and then maybe they are somehow informed by what is true. But the more and more I am on this wild ride that is the first half of the 21st century with you, the more I wonder whether those people are themselves prisoners. And that the images that are fed to us through sort of conventional media or the new media, online, social media, is the veracity even of the images, which are right again a derivative of the reality, are those even conforming to reality? It seems that if the people who are running sort of the facade show down in the cave are somehow informed with what is true, at least something is getting to the people who are trapped. But insofar as what I would say, like the Western intellectual tradition has been lost, and particularly by those who are kind of formed and informed or informing the media that regular people encounter, the less grasp we have of reality in recent years and in recent decades. Do you see a change, I guess, in the level of common discourse and the way that culture as a whole builds up society from, now granted it's within the span of our own lifetime, so we are still kind of right small creatures, temporally speaking, relative to God and the angels, but do you notice a decline there in public discourse, in what passes for what passes for I don't know, speech or dialogue, whether it be in the political sphere, in the kind of economic sphere, in the day-to-day lives of the people you work with?
Yeah, it's a big question in a way. I will say that, and I'll go kind of go back into the cave a little bit because I think there's some insight there that has resonance with this question at this particular time. Maybe not fully intended by Plato, but that's part of the richness of it. That this dialogue, this allegory, this vision seems to have relevance in every age, and I think because one of the points Plato is making is that any social system that humans create, socio-political system that humans generate, uh, has a significant level of deception in it. And some of it could be even like unintentional. Like the people walking behind the wall might think they're doing like great work, and like this is their calling, and this is how they're benefiting people. So interestingly, he leaves like the character of those people totally untouched. They're strange because you don't really know is it nefarious? Are they just kind of stooges who are playing out someone else's plan? You never know. But the point, I think, one of the points he's making is that you do have this problem of illusion and deception that seems to be present in basically every socio-political organization in human history. That is a pretty wide claim, but I think you'd find it. Sadly, I think you'd find it borne out. So, yeah. So, in different times, it takes on different manifestations, and different tools of illusion are available in different epochs. Especially, I mean, ours has an interesting array because of technology, some of which we're immersed in right now, and so I do think that we're more awash in projection than perhaps ever before because of because of the way this sort of technology can be so easily used in that project, or to be illusory or to be deceptive, even unintentionally. So yeah, I don't think it's, in other words, there's the impulse within human individual life and communal life is of course not at all new, but it has new amplifying apparatus that do seem to be just creating even more projections, even more. I'll use a word from, I think, Jean Baudrillard, simulacra. I think actually if anyone wants to look at some interesting stuff in relation to the cave, I think some of his theories could be very fruitfully compared to the cave analogy. But yeah, so I just think it is perhaps an age of unprecedented distraction and illusion, but because of the apparatus available with which to do it, and not because of any new not because of any new impulse in the human heart.
No, yeah, well said, and I think well diagnosed. Um, I guess then perhaps this is where you might be able to help me in understanding the allegory of the cave, because upon the exit out of the tunnel through out of the cave into the light of day is, and correct me if I mistake the allegory or how he presents it, how Plato presents it, but it's not just like the light of the sun, right? But it's almost sort of like this light of knowledge that allows knowledge of the forms, right? So in Platonic epistemology, you would have like the realm of the forms, right? And it's almost as if, right, the world around us and the trees, right? Trees are always kind of selected for something, like the form of the tree. We know that because of our kind of recollection of the knowledge of a tree and its form and its essence. Is, and for Plato, is that, for Plato it seems that the realm of the forms is what is truly real, and then all the kind of participating things in that realm, um, are real insofar as they participate in the reality of those forms. That's a sidestep to say, um, again, as someone more trained in sort of Aristotelian, metaphysics, uh, that that the loss, or the, I guess, the our societal the grip that our society um, has on us with respect to illusory forms, is the antidote to that seems to be kind of a reawakened desire and wonder for what is real, right? Sort of a realism, and so one way to do that, right, is to go outside. We have this expression, "Go touch grass," right? Uh, and to kind of engage in the reality of the world and its limitations, and not to be shackled by the virtual world, and that is uh, not helpful for us in terms of understanding what is true, because everything is questioned, everything is constructed, right? Everything is artificial in that sense. And so is that, you know put yourself in Plato's shoes. Would that be his response, that we need to go experience reality? Now, granted, he's like in what, fifth, sixth century BC. He's like, what do you mean real? Like, real is real. Like, there's a plague over there. There's a drought over there. Everything is real in his world. But how would he diagnose our world? I guess, in the sense of, how do we become more authentic humans? How do we become more in tune with what is true, given the current state of things?
Hmm. Well, I don't want to put words in Plato's mouth. I yeah, but let me take a bit of a guesstimate at how Plato might respond to that. Yeah, I think Plato's very concerned that people's consciousness not get arrested in what he calls the world of becoming. And now this is where some of his dualism would maybe come out. But the world of becoming is the lower region of these things that have their ephemeral being because they participate in the world of forms, the eternal forms that's the realm of being. So, but he's also, I think, where he would maybe be even more concerned about the situation today. It's not, people always have a problem of becoming derailed in their senses. You become sensualists, and um, you don't have to be a dualist to see where that could become a problem, right? That's not really a castigation of the material world, but um, so. But then there's also the social world, and the world that uh, is not the natural world of becoming, but is kind of another realm. And it's a very important realm. And I think Plato recognizes that. And I think some of his critiques of poets and artists, which some people see as harsh or just wrong, come from that concern. Because this third dimension, if you will, you have being, becoming, and then this realm of culture, if you want to call it that. And yeah, so he today, I mean, I think he was already leveling criticisms even in his own day. I think he would level the same ones, that people's consciousness, uh, both collective and individual, was being flooded with these images that do not accord with reality. People are losing track of their humanity in a haze of distorted imagery. I think Plato would say something like that, and that haze is thicker now than ever. Um, and it's not even a sensualism focused on the world of becoming. It's the world of becoming, in a way, always has in its favor that it tends towards being. I think Plato does see that it kind of wants to go there. it's a participation, and there's some yearning for the eternal parent in the children of being that is the realm of becoming. But in this other realm of culture, I mean, there might not be any of that yearning towards being. It could be going in an opposite direction. So it's a more dangerous realm, and it's I mean, I think he would, again, he had already seen it in his own day, but I think he would see it magnified many times in the current cultural milieu.
Yeah, no, that is. I think we are as a society, or at least me as an individual. I'll speak for myself. Kind of grasping kind of the compounding effect of a world of total illusion, in the sense of how much of our lives and experience are kind of caught up in what is happening through a visual medium of a screen, and not a lived experience. Sort of how not only does that kind of give you us a singular, or one-time input, but that it actually over the course of a childhood is one thing that parents need to be very concerned about. As a parent, I'm concerned about kind of how much of a virtual input, visual input is given into my kids versus their kind of grappling with reality as their natural senses will give to them, because that compounding kind of effect over their years that they don't have after a childhood of screen time. They don't have a kind of a framework to understand what is real and what isn't, what is possible, what is impossible, what is moral, what is immoral, because everything in a virtual world seems to have low stakes and therefore no import. And so even kind of the question of meaning then becomes a question, because everything virtual seems to have meaninglessness, or only meaning insofar as it gathers attention. So yeah, if I had to put myself as Plato in our shoes, or I could just be in my own shoes, I would say that I would call it like a compounding force of what is virtual over what is real has an effect on the human experience, on the human habituation towards virtue, towards the intellectual virtues of knowing and understanding, right? Of
Yeah.
investigating, of inquiry.
No, I would agree with that, and I think Plato would probably he would see what's happening as a decontextualizing of the person outside of the environment where they can actually become excellent human beings. And that's that's where he, in one sense, even though he gets identified as a dualist, and there's some truth to that, although some of his students, I think his followers, were even more pronounced. But the context for human excellence is still to some extent like the polis. I mean, this dialogue is unfolding, and it's in the Piraeus, actually, the port city of Athens. It's probably around the Earth 404, maybe it's before the end of the Peloponnesian War. They're real people, and you get the sense that they're real stakes too, because when the socio-political order does fall apart, as it invariably does, it goes badly, right? People get hurt, people get killed, people lose their orientation. But the point is that that's still a context for excellence. It's a real real relationships, a world where you are operating as a physical being who is limited by your physicality, but you also have this mind that yearns towards the eternal for Plato. But the drama of your excellence is playing out on this stage of physicality, and embodiment and communal existence. And to deracinate it and derail it into this world of mediated projections is, disastrous, I think, for Plato.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons why the BetterPears Cultural Empire, we have these online offerings such as the Confederal Reserve, we have the BetterPears podcast, but then also our in-person fellowships, dramatic readings of Shakespeare's greatest plays, right? Yeah. Participatory dramatic readings, where the people get together and they read together these great works, and then they have time at the end of each session to kind of discuss, right? So that in-person experiential, right, the full century, but not with like some sort of goggles on or whatever, but actual people in place, in time. It's more expensive to do it that way, but then again, it's also more fulfilling, I think, ultimately, to have that human interaction. Tom, I'd like to thank you for sharing your insights into Plato's Republic with us today. I was going to give you a chance to share, is there something you'd like to share that you haven't had a chance to yet about the Republic and to leave with our audience?
Well, I guess I would, by way of conclusion, I would actually encourage people, if you're inclined and have the time, to read it, or read another one of Plato's dialogues. Because the beautiful thing about these writings is you do get to encounter this other person's mind, and this person who is grappling with these questions, which we continue to grapple with. So I guess I would just say that don't take my brief and fairly superficial presentation as any sort of a whole encounter with Plato, but I encourage people who are listening, look at Plato or go back to him if you've read him before, and there's wisdom to be had in grappling with what he says.
Yeah, we certainly hope our conversation today has sort of piqued people's interest in Plato's Republic again. Tom, it was a pleasure having you on the show today. To our audience, from all of us at the Confederal Reserve and the BetterPears Cultural Empire, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on the Confederal Reserve. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. You can click here to watch a recent interview of the Confederal Reserve, or over here to view the playlist of the BetterPears podcast.